Libya's rebels close in on the desert town of Bani Walid, one of the last strongholds of pro-Gaddafi forces. Home at last, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the former IMF boss, is back in France after sexual assault charges in New York were dropped. Libyan opposition fighters are moving towards the desert town of Bani Walid, one of the last strongholds of pro-Gaddafi forces, after issuing an ultimatum for the town to surrender or face attack. We can go live now to our correspondent Ian Pannell, who's with opposition fighters just outside Bani Walid. What's the situation now, Ian?
Well, it seems to be pretty much a holding pattern, certainly in this area. I mean, we had been told that these fighters, you can see some of them behind me on what they call technicals, which are flatbed trucks with weapons mounted on the back, that they were planning to move certainly closer to Bani Walid, perhaps within 20 to 30 kilometres of the town. But for now, there doesn't seem to be any movement. I understand that there are fighters also gathered to the east of the town. These are people who've come down from Misrata, and there's a suggestion that perhaps they're also coming from the south. So really a convergence from three sides. But at the moment, we should stress this, there doesn't appear to be a push into the town itself. The deadline that had been mentioned by rebel commanders has certainly expired, but of course there was a much longer deadline that had originally been put in place by the National Transitional Council, which won't expire until next Saturday. If we move the camera around a bit, it just gives you a sense of the location of where we are. This is actually the road to Bani Walid. We're about, I guess, about 70 kilometres away at the moment. There is another rebel position, which is, we believe, another few kilometres down the road, but no further on this side. We've heard a little bit of firing, but it doesn't seem that that has been conflict. Perhaps it was firing into the air, but they are certainly have said publicly that they feel that today is a day, Sunday, when Bani Walid will effectively go over to the National Transitional Council and the flag of Colonel Gaddafi will no longer be flying. But we're waiting to see what that means in practice. There have been rebels coming from a number of different sides, not in huge numbers, but certainly enough to move down this road if they're also coming in from the other side.
And Ian, is it still thought that members of the Gaddafi family are there?
Well, certainly we've spoken to people who are categorically sure that there were certainly Saif al-Islam and Mu'tasim Gaddafi, two of Colonel Gaddafi's sons, were spotted in the town. They have said that they have had eyewitness reports saying that they were seen indeed in the city's hospital. Hamis Gaddafi, who was in charge of special forces, another one of Colonel Gaddafi's sons, was apparently killed on this road during the retreat from Tripoli. Remember, the rebels came in from the east and from the west, and this southerly road that heads in that direction was really the only escape route. So there has been a strong sense among the rebels. I mean, the commander here says he's 90% sure that the two brothers are still in the town, but you have to question, if they decided to retreat from Tripoli without putting up a fight, why make Bani Walid your last stand? But we don't really know at the moment. There was a suggestion that Colonel Gaddafi himself perhaps was in the town, but others are convinced that he's further south or even over towards the Algerian border. So there are a lot of unknowns at the moment. What we do know is that members of the Wafala tribe, who predominate in this area, have been meeting with Colonel Gaddafi's troops, and we're waiting to see the outcome of that.
Ian Pannell, outside Bani Walid. Now, more than 400,000 people have demonstrated across Israel against the high cost of living. The largest rally was in Tel Aviv, where the protest started 2 months ago. The demonstrators want cheaper housing, tax cuts and more free education. More than 1,000 protesters have taken to the streets of Hong Kong, demanding more public housing. They're angry over the soaring cost of property and want the government to act to bring prices down. The government has introduced new taxes and held land auctions in a bid to boost supply. The death toll from a tropical storm that struck western Japan on Saturday has reportedly risen to 11, with more than 30 people still missing. Typhoon Talas brought winds of more than 100 kilometres an hour. In some areas, torrential rain caused rivers to burst their banks. Dominique Strauss-Kahn is now back at home in Paris nearly 2 weeks after a New York court dismissed charges of sexual assault against him. But the former head of the IMF, who was once favourite to become the next French president, also faces allegations of a separate sexual assault in France. The Socialist Party MP, Jacques Lang, was there to welcome Mr Strauss-Kahn. He was asked if the former IMF chief had a political future in France.
He has to decide himself. He's free. But I am sure that in this world, where the talentless personalities are not so numerous, in Europe, a man as him, with his fabulous qualities, his international competence, his knowledge of economy, of the question of society, should be very useful for us, not only in France, but also in Europe. But he has to decide. I have not to decide instead of him.
Well, that was the Socialist Party MP Jacques Lang extolling the talents of Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Our correspondent Hugh Schofield also joins us live now from Paris. Is that view shared by many people in France, that Dominique Strauss-Kahn can be rehabilitated politically?
Jacques Lang is a very loyal fellow member of the Socialist Party and a neighbour of Dominique Strauss-Kahn in the elite Place des Vosges, where I think that interview was probably recorded. That was where Dominique Strauss-Kahn just returned to. So he has from the start taken very strongly the side of Dominique Strauss-Kahn, and it's no surprise that he's now airing the possibility that he may one day return to frontline politics because of his undoubted talents. I think the reality one has to face is that there's no prospect of that happening in any kind of meaningful term of time looking ahead. Certainly he's ruled out of next year's elections, that's quite clear. It's even questionable whether anyone really wants him to say anything about the elections next year. I mean, at one time he was the most sought-after voice in the Socialist Party, but I think the candidates for the Socialist nomination in next year's election, I think, are very chary now. I think François Hollande, Martine Aubry, the other big figures in the Socialist Party, would probably calculate that it would not be in their interest to have Dominique Strauss-Kahn at this moment talking in their favour, endorsing their candidacies. He is damaged goods. It may well be that this passes, and maybe in a year or two he will return to some kind of political role. But for the time being, all his political ambitions, I think, are at best dormant, at worst dead.
And he presumably has rather more pressing issues to deal with. He's still got to deal with a civil complaint in New York, and he's got another charge to face, hasn't he, in France? Yeah,
that just complicates things even more. He has, as you said, the chambermaid has her civil action still pursuant. And here in France, there's the ongoing case of Tristan Banon. That's the young journalist who filed suit in the kind of wash, in the wake of the Diallo, the chambermaid affair. And that investigation is at a very preliminary stage, but the police are looking into it, and it could turn into formal charges.
Hugh Schofield in Paris, thank you. And very quickly, let's have a look at New Zealand's famous emperor penguin, known as Happy Feet, who's dived back into life in the wild with a little push from his vet. He was helped down a makeshift slide into the sub-Antarctic south of New Zealand. The penguin was a long way from home when it came ashore 2 months ago and was nursed to health by Wellington Zoo. It had been 44 years since an emperor penguin was last seen in New Zealand's wild. That's all from the BBC World Newsroom for now.
Hello there. We'll start with a look at the weather across Asia for the next day or two. On Monday, we've got the showers there across central parts. Further north, we've got some wet weather there in central China and some very wet weather thanks to the remains of Tropical Storm Talas moving through Japan. So still some very heavy rain across northern parts of Japan. You will need to watch out for that. Some heavier downpours just working their way down into central parts of China on Monday. 1 or 2 showers further south. You might catch 1 or 2 of those in Hong Kong. Highs here of 31 degrees. Into Australia, largely fine, but we do have a succession of fronts moving across the south, so bringing showers from time to time for the likes of Adelaide and Melbourne. Into North America, we've got that tropical storm affecting the Gulf Coast, so here we will see some very heavy rain in the next few days with the risk of some further flooding. More details, of course, for you, as always, online.